Krixna had always believed the stories were exaggerated. The tales whispered in the dark corners of space stations, shared between traders over fermented drink, spoken in hushed tones by mercenaries who claimed to have witnessed the impossible. Humans, they said, were monsters disguised as prey animals. Weak-looking bipeds who could somehow tear apart battle cruisers with their bare hands when pushed too far. Standing now in the cramped briefing room aboard the merchant vessel Prosperity's Edge, watching the human delegation enter, Krixna felt his initial skepticism solidify into certainty. The creatures before him looked pathetic. Soft pink skin without natural armor, no visible claws or fangs, and those strange round eyes that seemed to constantly leak moisture. Their bodies were small compared to his own towering Zilani frame, and they moved with what appeared to be casual indifference to the dangers surrounding them. "These are our new security contractors," Second Officer Valen whispered beside him, his forearms crossing in disappointment. "Captain Thorne has lost his mind." The lead human stepped forward, extending one of those ridiculous appendages they called hands. "Commander Sarah Mitchell, Human Defense Corps. We're here to discuss the protection contract for your cargo run through the disputed zones." Captain Thorne, a grizzled Korthak whose scales bore the scars of countless battles, accepted the gesture with surprising respect. "Commander, your reputation precedes you. Though I admit, some of my crew have concerns about your species' combat capabilities." Mitchell's lips curved upward in what Krixna had learned was called a smile. On humans, this expression was meant to be friendly, but something about the way her eyes remained cold made his chitinous plates shift uncomfortably. "Understandable," she replied smoothly. "We're not as impressive as the Vortac shock troops or as numerous as the Hive warriors, but we get the job done." Krixna couldn't help but scoff. The sound escaped his vocal chambers before he could stop it, a clicking rasp that filled the sudden silence. Every eye in the room turned to him, including those unsettling human orbs. "You have something to say, weapons officer?" Captain Thorne's voice carried a warning edge. Krixna straightened his considerable height, his natural arrogance overriding his better judgment. "With respect, Captain, I've studied the tactical reports. Humans have never faced the Crimson Fleet. They specialize in ambush tactics and hit-and-run attacks against soft targets. When they encounter real opposition," he let the implication hang in the air. Commander Mitchell studied him with those strange, constantly moving eyes. "What's your name, officer?" "Krixna, weapons specialist, 3rd class." "Well, Krixna, you're absolutely right. We haven't faced the Crimson Fleet in direct combat. Yet." She paused, and that smile returned, somehow managing to be both pleasant and deeply disturbing. "But I'm curious about something. In your tactical studies, did you happen to review the Battle of Kepler Station?" The question caught Krixna off guard. Kepler Station had been a minor engagement, barely worth noting in the grand scope of galactic conflicts. A small skirmish. Insignificant. 47 pirates tried to board a human research facility. They were well-armed, experienced raiders who had successfully captured dozens of installations across 3 sectors. Mitchell's voice remained conversational, but something in her tone made the temperature in the room seem to drop. "Would you like to know how many escaped?" Krixna felt his confidence waver slightly, but pressed forward. "The reports I read were unclear on the details." "None." The single word fell like a stone into still water. 47 experienced pirates, all dead, killed by 12 humans. Researchers, Krixna, not soldiers. Scientists and engineers who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The weapons officer's mandibles clicked nervously. The reports mentioned defensive systems, disabled in the first wave of the attack. Mitchell's smile never wavered. "Would you like to know what the survivors from nearby ships reported seeing?" Before Krixna could answer, the human female continued. "They said the humans had gone mad. They fought with improvised weapons, with their bare hands, with anything they could find. One researcher killed 4 pirates with a maintenance tool. Another strangled a Vortac warrior with a power cable. The station's head scientist managed to take down 6 raiders using nothing but emergency supplies and what the survivors described as absolutely terrifying creativity." The briefing room had gone completely silent. Even the ship's environmental systems seemed to have quieted, as if the vessel itself was listening. "But here's the interesting part," Mitchell continued, her voice taking on an almost academic tone. "When the rescue ships arrived, they found something strange. The humans weren't celebrating. They weren't proud of their victory. They were crying. Krixna's confusion must have shown on his features because the human commander's expression shifted slightly, becoming something almost like pity. You see, Krixna, for most species, violence is either natural or trained. You fight because your instincts tell you to, or because you've been taught to. But humans, we're different. We can become absolutely lethal when we need to, but it costs us something every time. Those researchers at Kepler Station, they save themselves and their work, but they'll carry the memory of what they had to do for the rest of their lives. The implications of her words began to sink in, and Krixna felt something cold settle in his primary stomach. If humans could fight like that when they weren't even soldiers, what would actual human warriors be capable of? The thing about terror, Mitchell said, her smile finally fading, is that it works both ways. We can feel it, and we can inspire it. The question is which direction it flows when the shooting starts. Captain Thorne cleared his throat, breaking the spell that had settled over the room. Commander, your terms are acceptable. When do your people board? My team is already aboard, Captain. We came up with your supply shipment 2 hours ago. The captain's eye stalks swiveled in surprise. Already aboard? I didn't authorize any additional personnel transfers. Mitchell's smile returned, and this time Krixna was certain he could see predatory intent behind it. You didn't need to. We're very good at going unnoticed when necessary. As if summoned by her words, shadows seemed to detach themselves from various corners of the room. What Krixna had taken from maintenance equipment, storage containers, and even sections of the wall itself revealed themselves to be humans in some form of adaptive camouflage. In seconds, the room contained twice as many occupants as it had moments before. The weapons officer's nervous system nearly overloaded as he realized one of the new arrivals had been standing less than 2 feet from him for the entire briefing. Close enough to kill him before he could even register the attack. This is Sergeant Rodriguez, my second, Mitchell said, gesturing to a human who seemed to have materialized directly behind Captain Thorne. Corporal Kim handles electronic warfare and communications. Private Jackson specializes in demolitions and creative problem-solving. Each introduction revealed another human who had somehow infiltrated their supposedly secure briefing room without triggering a single alarm or detection system. How many of you are there? Second Officer Vallon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Enough, was Mitchell's simple reply. Captain Thorne's expression had shifted from surprise to something approaching respect. I begin to understand why the Galactic Council has been so careful in their interactions with your species. We prefer to think of it as healthy caution, Mitchell replied. Now, about our route through the disputed zones. I've reviewed your flight plan, and I'm afraid we'll need to make some modifications. She activated a holographic display that showed their intended path through space. Red markers indicated known pirate strongholds, while yellow zones marked areas of recent raider activity. Your current route takes you directly through 3 high-risk areas, she continued, highlighting sections of the map. Normally, merchant vessels try to avoid these zones entirely, but that adds significant time and fuel costs to the journey. That's why we hired you, Captain Thorne said. We need to make this run profitable, which means taking the shorter route despite the risks. Mitchell nodded. Understood. However, I'm suggesting we take an even more direct path. She manipulated the display, showing a route that cuts straight through the heart of the most dangerous territory. This cuts 2 days off your travel time and saves approximately 30% on fuel costs. Creatus mandibles klikt in disbelief. That route goes directly through Crimson Fleet territory. It's suicide. Not suicide, Mitchell corrected. It's psychology. Pirates expect merchants to avoid the most dangerous areas. They don't set up ambushes where they don't expect targets. By taking the route no sane captain would choose, we actually reduce our chances of encountering organized resistance. And if we're wrong? Vallon asked. The human commander's smile became something that would have made a darkness beast reconsider its life choices. Then we get to field test some new tactics my team has been developing. Something in her tone made Krixna suspect that part of her actually hoped they would encounter pirates. The realization sent his equivalent of a shiver down his spinal plates. Over the next few hours, as the human team integrated themselves into the ship's operations, Krixna found himself watching them with growing unease. They moved through the vessel like ghosts, somehow always appearing in exactly the right place at the right time. When engineering reported a minor malfunction in the plasma conduits, A human technician was already there with tools in hand. When the navigation computer registered a small anomaly, one of Mitchell's people was reviewing the data before the ship's own sensor specialist had even noticed the alert. It was as if they had somehow become part of the ship's essential systems in a matter of hours. "They make me nervous," Valen confided during their duty shift. "There's something unnatural about the way they operate." Crixna nodded agreement, but found himself unable to articulate exactly what bothered him about their new passengers. It wasn't anything specific they did or said. It was more like a constant, low-level awareness that something deadly was sharing their space. Like knowing there was a charged plasma weapon pointed at your back, even when you couldn't see it. The feeling intensified when he witnessed one of their training sessions. He had been making his routine inspection of the cargo bay when he heard strange sounds from the converted exercise area. Curious, he peered through the observation port and immediately wished he hadn't. Two humans were engaged in what they called sparring practice. To Crixna, it looked like they were trying to kill each other with surgical precision. They moved faster than his eyes could track, striking and blocking with movements that seemed to defy the physical limitations of their fragile-looking bodies. One human launched himself into the air, spinning impossibly fast, while the other responded by dropping low and sweeping his opponent's legs in a motion that should have shattered bones, but somehow resulted in both fighters rolling smoothly back to their feet. What disturbed him most wasn't the violence of their movements, but the absolute control they displayed. Every strike that could have been lethal stopped just short of causing damage. Every throw that could have broken necks ended with gentle landings. They were fighting at full speed and intensity while maintaining perfect safety margins. It was like watching predators play with the concept of murder. Beautiful, isn't it? Crixna spun around to find Commander Mitchell standing behind him, somehow having approached without making a sound despite the metal deck plating. "I was not aware you had scheduled training time," he managed to say. "We didn't. Human physiology requires regular physical exertion to maintain optimal performance. We adapt our schedules around the ship's needs." She moved to stand beside him at the observation port. Those two have been sparring partners for 3 years. They know each other's fighting styles better than they know their own names. They appear to be trying to injure each other. Mitchell's laugh was genuinely warm, and somehow that made it more unsettling than if it had been cold. "Oh, they are. But they're also making sure they don't. It's a very human distinction." She gestured toward the sparring humans. "Sergeant Rodriguez there? He once held off an entire squad of Hive warriors for 47 minutes, while civilians evacuated a colony ship. Private Kim helped take down a rogue AI that had commandeered a dreadnought. They've both seen real combat, faced actual death, made impossible decisions under impossible pressure." Crixna watched the humans continue their deadly dance, beginning to understand what he was really seeing. "When we practice like this, we're not just maintaining our physical abilities," Mitchell continued. "We're keeping our edge sharp, making sure that when the moment comes and we need to transition from peaceful beings to something else entirely, we can do it without hesitation." "Something else?" Crixna asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, watching her people train. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that seemed to press against his chest plates. Every human alive carries within them the genetic memory of creatures that once hunted megafauna with pointed sticks. We're descended from beings that looked at cave bears and saber-toothed cats and decided those would make good dinner. We conquered our own world not through natural weapons or armor, but through stubbornness, creativity, and an absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. She turned to look at him directly, and for a moment Crixna saw something ancient and implacable looking back at him through those deceptively soft eyes. "We spent thousands of years learning to be civilized, learning to cooperate and build and create instead of just survive. But when we need to, when circumstances require it." She paused. "Well, you'll see." The proximity alarms chose that moment to begin wailing throughout the ship, and suddenly, the training session was forgotten as both humans instantly snapped into combat readiness. They moved from relaxed sparring to full tactical alertness faster than Crixna's nervous system could process. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, came the announcement over the ship's communication system. Multiple signatures, configuration unknown. Mitchell was already moving toward the command center, her entire demeanor transformed. Gone was the conversational commander who had been explaining human nature. In her place was something that moved with predatory purpose and spoke in clipped, efficient phrases. Rodriguez, Kim, full combat load. Jackson, I want overwatch on all approach vectors. Everyone else, silent running protocols. This is not a drill. As alarms continued to sound throughout the ship, Krixna found himself following the humans toward what might be their first real test. Part of him was terrified by what they might encounter in the void of space. But a larger part of him was beginning to realize that whatever was out there should probably be more afraid of what was coming toward them aboard the Prosperity's edge. The stories, he was beginning to suspect, might not have been exaggerated after all. They might have been understated. The command center had transformed into something Krixna barely recognized. Where moments before there had been the usual controlled chaos of a merchant vessel navigating dangerous space, now there was an almost supernatural quiet. The human security team had seamlessly integrated with the ship's crew, but their presence had changed the very atmosphere of the bridge. Commander Mitchell stood beside Captain Thorne at the main display, studying the sensor readings with an intensity that made the air feel electrically charged. Her people had taken positions throughout the command center, but not randomly. Krixna realized they had positioned themselves to cover every entrance, every critical system, and every crew member who might panic under pressure. 7 ships, reported Navigation Officer Ilex, his tentacles dancing nervously over his console. Configuration matches Crimson Fleet attack formation. They're maintaining distance at the edge of our sensor range. Smart, Mitchell murmured, her voice carrying none of the earlier conversational warmth. They're taking time to assess us, figure out our capabilities before committing to an attack. Captain Thorne's scales rippled with frustration. In my experience, pirates don't hesitate when they outnumber their targets 7-1. In their experience, merchants don't travel with human security teams, Mitchell replied. They're being cautious because they've heard the stories too. Krixna found himself studying the tactical display with new understanding. The pirate formation was textbook perfect for attacking a single merchant vessel. 3 fast attack craft positioned to cut off escape routes, 2 heavy cruisers providing main firepower, and 2 support vessels ready to handle boarding operations and cargo transfer. It was a formation designed to minimize risk while maximizing profit. They're hailing us, Communications Officer Trent announced, his vocal sacs inflating nervously. Put them through, Captain Thorne ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the lead pirate vessel. The figure that appeared was a massive Gorlin, his natural armor, plating scarred from countless battles. When he spoke, his voice carried the confidence of someone who had never encountered serious resistance. Merchant vessel, this is Captain Vex of the Crimson Fleet. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Comply immediately and your crew will not be harmed. Captain Thorne looked to Mitchell, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Captain Vex, this is Captain Thorne of the merchant vessel Prosperity's Edge. I'm afraid we cannot comply with your request. We are under contract to deliver our cargo on schedule. Vex's laugh was like grinding metal. You cannot be serious. Look at your sensors, little merchant. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now and live to trade another day. I appreciate the offer, Thorne replied smoothly, but I'm confident in my security arrangements. For a moment, Vex looked confused. Pirates were accustomed to immediate surrender or desperate bargaining. Calm defiance wasn't in their usual repertoire of responses. Security arrangements? Vex's voice took on a mocking tone. I see no escort vessels on my sensors. Are you planning to fight 7 warships with a converted cargo hauler? Mitchell stepped forward, moving into the camera's field of view. The reaction was immediate and telling. Vex's expression shifted from amusement to something approaching concern. Captain Vex, she said pleasantly, this is Commander Mitchell, Human Defense Corps. I'm afraid you've selected a very poor target for today's piracy attempt. The silence that followed stretched for long seconds. Krixna could see Vex processing this information, and the weapons officer realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. Pirates who had built their reputation on inspiring fear in others were experiencing that same emotion for the first time. Humans, Vex said finally, his voice noticeably less confident. The stories say you're dangerous fighters. The stories, Mitchell replied, her smile returning, tend to be conservative estimates. But you're only a handful against our full fleet. Surely you cannot believe you can prevail against such odds. Mitchell's smile widened, and Krixna felt his chitinous plates shift involuntarily. There was something in that expression that spoke of anticipation rather than fear. Captain Vex, may I ask you a question? The pirate leader's confusion was evident. What question? Have you ever wondered why human merchant vessels don't travel in convoys like other species? Why we're comfortable sending single ships through the most dangerous regions of space? Vex didn't answer immediately, but Krixna could see the question had struck something uncomfortable in the pirate's mind. It's because, Mitchell continued conversationally, every human ship is a convoy unto itself. We don't need external protection because we are the protection. She gestured casually toward her team. These 5 humans have more combined combat experience than your entire fleet. They've fought in conflicts you've never heard of, against enemies that would give your worst nightmares. And they've been looking forward to meeting the famous Crimson Fleet for quite some time. Something cold was spreading through Krixna's nervous system as he watched the exchange. Mitchell wasn't posturing or bluffing. She was genuinely excited about the prospect of fighting 7 warships with 5 soldiers and a merchant crew. You speak boldly for someone about to die, Vex growled, but there was something hollow in his bravado now. Captain Vex, Mitchell said, her tone becoming almost sympathetic, I'm going to offer you the same courtesy you offered us. Leave now, and you'll live to pirate another day. Stay and discover why human military doctrine is studied in war colleges across the galaxy. The communication channel closed abruptly. Through the tactical display, they could see the pirate fleet's formation shifting, becoming more defensive. The predators had suddenly realized they might have cornered prey that could bite back. Weapons powered and tracking, Krixna reported automatically, then paused. Commander, our armament is designed for defense against single raiders. Against a full fleet, won't be sufficient on its own, Mitchell agreed. But we're not relying solely on the ship's weapons. She moved to her own console, her fingers dancing across controls with practiced ease. Rodriguez, begin Phase 1 deployment. Kim, I want full-spectrum electronic warfare ready in 30 seconds. Jackson, prepare to demonstrate creative problem-solving. Krixna watched in fascination as data streams began flowing between human equipment and the ship's systems. Somehow, in the few hours they'd been aboard, the humans had integrated their technology so completely with the merchant vessel's infrastructure that they now had access to capabilities that hadn't existed in the original design specifications. What exactly are you doing? He asked. Improving our odds, Mitchell replied without looking up. Human military philosophy centers around what we call force multiplication, making 5 soldiers fight like 50, or making a merchant vessel perform like a warship. The tactical display updated, showing new information about their surroundings that the ship's original sensors had been incapable of detecting. Suddenly, they could see details about the pirate vessel's configurations, crew complements, and weapon systems that should have been impossible to acquire at this range. How are you getting this data? Trade secret, Mitchell said with that unsettling smile. But I can tell you that every piece of technology in this galaxy was built by someone who needed to make a living. And humans are very good at understanding how things work. The proximity alarms shifted to a more urgent tone as the pirate fleet began to advance. Captain Thorne moved to his command position, his experience taking over despite the unprecedented nature of their situation. All crew to battle stations. Secure for combat maneuvering. Throughout the ship, Krixna could hear the sounds of systems powering up and crew members moving to their assigned positions. But overlaying the familiar sounds of a merchant vessel preparing for trouble was something else entirely. The humans were moving through the ship with purposes he couldn't quite understand, their activities seeming to follow patterns he couldn't recognize. Contact in 3 minutes, Ilex reported. They're spreading out to surround us. Let them, Mitchell said calmly. The more they spread out, the more they limit their own mutual support capabilities. She touched her communication device, speaking to her team throughout the ship. All stations ready? Good. Remember, we want to make an impression. These people are going to have stories to tell when this is over, assuming any of them survive. Let's make sure those stories serve our purposes. Krixna felt something like ice forming in his primary stomach. Mitchell was planning for the psychological impact their actions would have on future pirates, thinking several moves ahead to encounters that hadn't even happened yet. 2 minutes to contact. The lead pirate vessel was closing rapidly, its weapons powering up. Behind it, The other 6 ships were positioning themselves to create an inescapable web of crossfire. It was a professional operation executed by beings who had conducted hundreds of similar attacks. "Incoming transmission," Trent announced. "Put it through," Captain Thorne ordered. Vex appeared on screen again, his expression now showing a mixture of determination and confusion. "Human, you have had time to consider your position. Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick." Mitchell studied the pirate captain with the dispassionate interest of a scientist examining an interesting specimen. "Captain Vex, before we begin, may I share something with you?" "What?" "In human military history, there's a concept called Pyrrhic victory. It refers to a victory so costly that it might as well be a defeat. I want you to understand that even if you manage to destroy us, which is extremely unlikely, the cost will be so high that you'll regret ever hearing the name of this ship." She paused, letting that sink in. "But, more importantly, I want you to know that this encounter is being recorded and transmitted to every human vessel in the sector. What happens here today will determine how humanity responds to Crimson Fleet activities going forward." Vex's confidence visibly wavered. "You threaten us with your fleet?" "I'm not threatening anything," Mitchell replied pleasantly. "I'm simply explaining that you have approximately 90 seconds to decide whether the Crimson Fleet wants to become humanity's primary training target for anti-piracy operations." The communication channel closed again, but this time Crixna could see uncertainty in the pirate formation. Ships were hesitating, their advance becoming less coordinated. 1 minute to contact. Mitchell addressed the bridge crew directly. "In about 30 seconds, you're going to see things happen very quickly. Whatever you observe, whatever seems impossible or inexplicable, just keep doing your jobs. We'll handle the impossible parts." She activated her communication device one final time. "All teams, commence operation. Show them why humans don't need escorts." The first indication that something extraordinary was happening came when 3 of the pirate vessels suddenly found their weapon systems offline. No explosions, no visible damage, just the sudden absence of threat indicators on the tactical display. "Ow, Kriegsnabrit." "Electronic warfare," Mitchell replied casually. "We've been infiltrating their systems since the moment they appeared on our sensors. Turns out most pirate vessels don't invest heavily in cybersecurity." The second indication was when one of the heavy cruisers began listing to starboard, its engines cutting out apparently at random. "Remote code injection," Mitchell explained before anyone could ask. "We convinced their navigation computer that it was experiencing a cascade failure in the port engine systems. It'll take them at least 10 minutes to sort out the false signals from the real ones." But the third indication was what made Krixnar realize he was witnessing something that would fundamentally change his understanding of what it meant to be human. The lead pirate vessel, Captain Vex's ship, suddenly erupted in a series of small explosions along its hull. Not enough to destroy the ship, but more than enough to cripple its primary systems. "What did you do to them?" Mitchell's smile became something that belonged in the darkest regions of space. "Oh, that. Well, it turns out that when humans say they've been aboard your ship for several hours, it's wise to take that statement very literally." As if summoned by her words, a new voice crackled over the communication system. A human voice, speaking from inside the pirate vessel. "Bridge, this is Corporal Martinez. Package delivered. Target's main weapons offline, shields down, and life support cycling to emergency power. Ready for Phase 2. Creatus mandibles klikt in disbelief." "You have someone aboard their ship?" "We have someone aboard all of their ships," Mitchell corrected. "My team is larger than 5 people, Crixna. Much larger. We just didn't see the need to mention our friends in the stealth pods until now." The tactical display updated again, this time showing human infiltration teams aboard every pirate vessel in the fleet. Somehow, while he'd been worrying about 7 warships against 1 merchant vessel, the humans had turned the situation into something completely different. They hadn't been trapped by the pirate fleet. They had trapped the pirate fleet. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No," Mitchell replied, her attention now focused on coordinating a complex multi-ship operation that should have required a fleet command center. "This is human standard operating procedure. We don't fight fair, Crixna. We fight to win." The next few minutes redefined everything Crixna thought he knew about space combat. Instead of a desperate battle between overwhelming forces and a single merchant vessel, he found himself watching a carefully orchestrated demolition of an entire pirate fleet by an enemy they had never even seen coming. Human infiltration teams moved through pirate vessels like ghosts made of death, systematically dismantling critical systems while avoiding unnecessary casualties. It was surgical, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its precision. Surrender, came a broken transmission from Captain Vex. We surrender. Mitchell studied the communication for a moment before responding. Surrender accepted, Captain Vex. However, I'm afraid the terms are non-negotiable. She outlined demands that would effectively end the Crimson Fleet's operations in this sector while providing human intelligence services with detailed information about pirate operations throughout the galaxy. It wasn't just a victory, it was the complete conversion of an enemy force into an intelligence asset. As the pirate ships powered down their weapons and prepared to be escorted to the nearest human outpost, Crixknoth found himself staring at Mitchell with something approaching religious awe. "How long have you been planning this operation?" "Since we received the contract," she replied simply. "We knew the Crimson Fleet operated in this area. We knew they would eventually try to intercept us. So we prepared accordingly." She gestured toward the tactical display, showing 7 disabled pirate vessels and their human prize crews. This wasn't a battle, Crixknoth. This was a recruitment operation. The weapons officer felt his world shift on its axis. The humans hadn't been hired to protect a merchant vessel. They had used the merchant vessel as bait to capture an entire pirate fleet. And they had done it while making it look effortless. As the realization of what he had just witnessed began to sink in, Crixknoth understood that the stories he had dismissed as exaggerations were actually warnings. The humans weren't just dangerous fighters. They were something far worse. They were dangerous thinkers. And they were on his side. The aftermath of the Crimson Fleet encounter should have been cause for celebration. Instead, Crixknoth found himself in the observation deck at 0300 ship time, staring out at the stars and trying to process what he had witnessed. The pirate vessels were now traveling in formation with them, their crews under human supervision, heading toward a rendezvous with what Commander Mitchell had casually referred to as processing facilities. He wasn't alone in his vigil. Throughout the ship, crew members were displaying signs of what the ship's medical officer had diagnosed as acute cognitive dissonance. They had all witnessed the impossible made routine, and their minds were struggling to accommodate this new reality. Trouble sleeping? Crixknoth didn't turn around. He had learned to recognize the sound of human footsteps, though he suspected Mitchell could move silently if she chose to. The fact that she was allowing him to hear her approach was probably meant to be reassuring. "I have been reconsidering certain assumptions about the nature of warfare," he replied. Mitchell moved to stand beside him at the observation port, her reflection ghost-like in the transparent aluminum. "It's disturbing, isn't it? Realizing that everything you thought you knew about tactics and strategy was based on incomplete information. Your people didn't fight like soldiers," Crixknoth said slowly. "They fought like something else entirely." "We fought like humans," Mitchell corrected. "The problem is that most species try to understand human combat doctrine through the lens of their own military traditions. It doesn't work that way." She was quiet for a moment, then continued in a voice that carried an almost educational tone. "Tell me, Crixknoth, what do you know about human evolution?" The question seemed to come from nowhere, but the weapons officer had learned to trust that human conversations had purposes, even when those purposes weren't immediately apparent. "Basic facts. Your species evolved on a world with higher gravity than galactic standard. You were persistence hunters rather than ambush predators. You developed tool use early in your evolutionary history." All true, but incomplete. Mitchell turned to face him directly. "What the textbooks don't usually mention is that humans evolved as persistence hunters on a world where we were, for most of our development, prey animals. Crixknoth's Hikinos plates shifted nervously. Prey animals? For the first few million years of human existence, we were food for things bigger, stronger, and faster than we were. Saber-toothed cats, cave bears, direwolves, creatures that could kill us without effort if they caught us." Mitchell's voice carried an odd note of pride. "But they had to catch us first." She gestured toward the starfield beyond the observation port. "Every other species in the galaxy evolved from apex predators. The Vortak, the Gorlan, the Zalani. Your ancestors ruled their environments through strength or speed or natural weapons. You developed military tactics based on dominant strategies because that's what worked for your species." Crixknoth was beginning to understand where this was leading, and the implications were disturbing. Humans developed as prey that learned to hunt. We didn't evolve natural weapons, so we made them. We weren't fast, so we outlasted our enemies. We weren't strong, so we became clever. Mitchell's reflection smiled in the observation port, and the expression was anything but human in its warmth. And we learned that the most dangerous thing you can do to a human is make them afraid. The pirates made you afraid? Oh no, Mitchell laughed, and the sound raised all of Crixnaw's threat assessment systems to maximum alert. The pirates made the mistake of threatening people under our protection. That's very different from making us afraid. That makes us angry. Before Crixnaw could respond, the ship's communication system activated with an urgent priority message. All senior staff to the command center immediately. Priority Alpha situation developing. Mitchell was moving before the announcement finished, and Crixnaw found himself following her toward what was apparently another crisis. As they moved through the ship's corridors, he noticed that her casual demeanor had shifted again. The relaxed human who had been explaining evolutionary psychology was gone, replaced by something that moved with predatory efficiency. "What's a priority alpha situation?" he asked. "Something that requires immediate attention from command personnel," she replied without slowing her pace. "Usually means we're about to encounter something the original mission parameters didn't account for." They reached the command center to find Captain Thorne studying a tactical display that showed something Crixnaw had never seen before. Massive ships were approaching their position, but their configuration didn't match any known design in the galactic databases. Status report. Mitchell requested as she moved to her console. Unknown fleet of 6 vessels. Configuration completely unfamiliar, reported Navigation Officer Ilex. They appeared at the edge of our sensor range approximately 5 minutes ago. No response to standard identification requests. Mitchell studied the display with the focused intensity Crixnaw was learning to associate with humans processing tactical information. Size comparison to our captured pirate vessels. Each unknown ship is approximately 3 times the mass of our largest captured vessel, Captain Thorne replied. If they're warships, we're looking at firepower capable of reducing this entire fleet to debris in minutes. Transmission incoming. Announced communications officer Trent. They're hailing us. Put it through, Captain Thorne ordered. The main screen activated to reveal something that made every non-human in the command center take an involuntary step backward. The being on the screen was clearly predatory in origin, with multiple rows of crystalline teeth and sensory organs that seemed to track movement with disturbing precision. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonic frequencies that triggered deep, instinctual fear responses in most galactic species. Unknown vessels. This is Warspeaker Thex of the Devourer Fleet. You will prepare to be consumed. Your resistance will serve only to make the consumption more enjoyable. Crixnaw felt his nervous system begin to shut down non-essential functions in preparation for what his instincts recognized as imminent death. Around the command center, other crew members were displaying similar responses. Even Captain Thorne, despite his extensive combat experience, had gone completely still in the manner of prey animals hoping to avoid notice. Only the humans seemed unaffected. Mitchell studied the alien war speaker with the same dispassionate interest she might show toward an interesting piece of art. When she spoke, her voice carried none of the fear that was paralyzing everyone else. Warspeaker Thex, this is Commander Mitchell of the Human Defense Corps. Before you proceed with whatever consumption activities you have planned, I have a question. The alien's multiple sensory organs focused on her with what might have been confusion. You will speak your question, prey thing, before you are consumed. I'm curious about your species' evolutionary history. Are you naturally void-dwelling, or did you develop space flight relatively recently? The question was so completely unexpected that it seemed to short-circuit whatever response pattern the war speaker had been following. You ask about evolution? In your final moments. It's relevant to what happens next, Mitchell replied pleasantly. You see, humans have encountered apex predators before. Many times, actually, and there's something we've learned about predators that might interest you. She leaned forward slightly, and Crixnaw noticed that her smile had returned. This time, however, there was something in that expression that made the alien war speaker's own predatory features seem almost friendly by comparison. What we've learned, Mitchell continued conversationally, is that apex predators who have never encountered serious resistance tend to become overconfident. They develop hunting strategies based on the assumption that their prey will behave predictably when threatened. Warspeaker Thex's harmonic voice took on an edge of irritation. You speak of matters that do not concern you, prey thing. Prepare for consumption. "Oh, but they do concern me," Mitchell replied, her smile widening. "Because you've just made the same mistake the Crimson Fleet made. You've assumed that you're the predator in this situation." She activated her console, and, suddenly, the tactical display revealed information that transformed their understanding of their current position. What had appeared to be empty space was actually filled with human vessels, their stealth systems so advanced they had been completely invisible to conventional sensors. You see, War Speaker Thex, humans don't travel alone through dangerous space. We travel in what we call hunter groups. And you've just announced your intention to attack a group that includes 2 human dreadnoughts for heavy cruisers and approximately 30 smaller attack craft. The alien's multiple eyes seemed to lose focus as it processed this information. "This is impossible. Our sensors detected no other vessels." "Your sensors," Mitchell explained with the patience of a teacher instructing a particularly slow student, "were designed to detect threats from other apex predators. They weren't designed to detect prey animals that learn to hunt in packs." She touched a control, and the space around them suddenly filled with ships that materialized like ghosts becoming solid. The Devourer fleet, which moments before had seemed overwhelmingly powerful, was now surrounded by human vessels that had been stalking them since they first appeared on sensors. "The interesting thing about human pack hunting," Mitchell continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone discussing a fascinating academic subject, "is that it evolved from our tendency to turn being hunted into hunting the hunters. It's a very specific behavioral adaptation." War Speaker Thex was no longer displaying the confident demeanor of an apex predator. Its sensory organs were moving rapidly, trying to track threats that seemed to be appearing from every direction. "You cannot have so many vessels in this sector without our knowledge, can't we?" Mitchell asked. "War Speaker, may I ask you something? How many human vessels has your fleet encountered before today?" When the alien didn't respond immediately, she continued, "The reason I ask is that every human ship you've ever encountered was probably running silent protocols. We've been tracking your fleet for approximately 3 weeks, learning your patrol patterns, your hunting strategies, your command structure." She gestured toward the display, showing the Devourer fleet now completely surrounded by human vessels. "This isn't an accidental encounter, War Speaker. This is a carefully planned military operation." Krixnoff found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "You used us as bait." "Again, not exactly," Mitchell replied, though she didn't look away from the alien War Speaker. "We used you as the trigger. The Devourer fleet has been hunting merchant vessels in this region for several months. We needed them to reveal their full operational capabilities so we could plan an appropriate response." She returned her attention to War Speaker Thex. "The thing is, your species made a fundamental error in your strategic assessment. You assumed that because humans appear to be prey animals, we think like prey animals. But evolution is more complex than that." The main display shifted to show detailed scans of the Devourer fleet vessels, revealing structural weaknesses, weapon configurations, and crew distributions that should have been impossible to detect. "For the past 3 weeks, we've been conducting what we call behavioral analysis of your fleet. We know how your ships operate, how your crew responds to threats, how your command structure functions under pressure." Mitchell's smile had become something that belonged in nightmares. "We've been hunting you while you thought you were hunting us." War Speaker Thex's harmonic voice had taken on frequencies that suggested deep distress. "What do you want?" "Surrender," Mitchell replied simply. "Your fleet, your ships, and complete intelligence regarding Devourer operations in this galactic sector. And if we refuse?" Mitchell was quiet for a moment, and, when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that seemed to press against the hull of the ship itself. "War Speaker, your species evolved as apex predators. You developed hunting strategies based on overwhelming your prey through superior firepower and intimidation. It's worked for you for probably thousands of years." She paused, and Krixnar realized he was holding his breath. "But humans evolved as prey that learned to kill predators. When something hunts us, we don't just fight back. We make sure it never hunts anything again." The silence that followed seemed to stretch across space itself. When War Speaker Thex finally spoke, its harmonic voice had lost all traces of predatory confidence. "We surrender." As the Devourer fleet powered down their weapons and prepared to be taken into custody, Krixna found himself staring at Commander Mitchell with something approaching religious terror. In the space of less than 24 hours, he had watched her systematically dismantle 2 separate fleets without firing a shot. She caught him staring and smiled with what might have been genuine warmth. "Something wrong, Crixna?" "I am beginning to understand," he said slowly, "why the Galactic Council has been so careful in their diplomatic relations with humanity." Mitchell's laugh was genuinely amused. "Oh, you haven't seen anything yet. Wait until you meet our diplomats." The weapons officer decided he didn't want to know what that meant. He was beginning to suspect that his education in the nature of humanity had only just begun. 3 days after the Devourer fleet incident, Crixna was beginning to understand that his definition of normal space travel had been fundamentally altered. What should have been a routine cargo run had transformed into something resembling a military campaign, complete with captured enemy vessels, intelligence operations, and what the humans casually referred to as diplomatic opportunities. He found himself in the ship's converted briefing room, watching Commander Mitchell coordinate activities across what had become a small fleet. The captured pirate vessels were now serving as training platforms for human boarding techniques, while the Devourer ships were being systematically analyzed for technology that might prove useful to human military development. Status report. Mitchell requested as her senior staff assembled around the holographic display table. Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression carrying the professional satisfaction of someone who had completed a difficult assignment. "All captured vessels secured. Crew transfers complete. We've identified 17 potential intelligence assets among the prisoners and 43 individuals who might be suitable for rehabilitation programs." "Rehabilitation programs?" Crixna asked before he could stop himself. Mitchell turned to him with that patient expression he was learning to associate with human explanations of concepts that should have been obvious but somehow weren't. "Pirates and raiders aren't born, Crixna. They're usually made by circumstances. Economic desperation, political instability, lack of legitimate opportunities for advancement." She gestured toward the data streams flowing across the display. "Most of these individuals can be redirected toward productive activities if they're given better options." Corporal Kim looked up from her technical analysis station. "Commander, we've completed our assessment of the Devourer technology. Their bioneural processing systems are approximately 40 years ahead of anything in the standard galactic databases. Useful, extremely. With proper integration, we could improve our ship-to-ship coordination capabilities by at least 300%. Mitchell nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Begin integration protocols on a volunteer basis. Full informed consent documentation required." Crixna found himself confused again. Volunteer basis? Human military doctrine prohibits the use of technology that hasn't been thoroughly tested by willing participants, Mitchell explained. "We don't experiment on unwilling subjects, even enemy combatants. But they were trying to consume you." "Yes, and now they're not. The situation has changed, so our response changes accordingly." Mitchell's tone suggested this should be self-evident. Humans have a concept called proportional response. We use only the amount of force necessary to achieve our objectives. Before Crixna could process the implications of that statement, the ship's communication system activated with another priority alert. "All senior staff to the command center. We have an incoming priority transmission from Fleet Command." They moved through the ship's corridors with what had become their standard efficiency, but Crixna noticed something different in the humans' demeanor. There was a tension in their movements that hadn't been present during their encounters with pirates or alien predators. "Is there a problem?" he asked. "Depends on why Fleet Command is contacting us directly," Rodriguez replied. "Direct communication from Command usually means either very good news or very bad news. There's rarely anything in between." They reached the command center to find Captain Thorne already at his station, his expression grim. The main display showed the seal of the Human Defense Corps, indicating an official military transmission. "Commander Mitchell," came a voice from the speakers. "This is Admiral Chun. Please respond on Secure Channel 7 immediately." Mitchell moved to her console and activated what Crixna assumed was the requested secure communication channel. The main display shifted to show a human female whose age was difficult to determine, but whose bearing suggested extensive military experience. "Admiral Chun," Mitchell acknowledged. "Status report requested." "Commander, we've been monitoring your activities in the disputed zones. The capture of both the Crimson Fleet and the Devourer fleet has created complications." Mitchell's expression didn't change, but something in her posture suggested increased attention. "What kind of complications, Admiral?" "The kind that involve emergency sessions of the Galactic Council and formal demands for explanations regarding human military capabilities." Admiral Chen's tone carried a mixture of frustration and what might have been admiration. Your little operation has scared some very important people. Krixna felt his chitinous plates shift nervously. He had witnessed the events Admiral Chen was referring to, and if they were causing concern at the highest levels of galactic government, the implications were staggering. I followed established protocols for anti-piracy operations, Mitchell replied calmly. Sarah, you captured 2 entire fleets without firing a shot. You turned a routine merchant escort mission into the most successful intelligence operation in recent galactic history. The protocols don't have guidelines for that level of creativity. Admiral Chen paused, studying something off-screen before continuing. The Galactic Council is demanding a full briefing on human military doctrine. They want to understand exactly what they're dealing with when they interact with our species. And our response? We're sending you to provide that briefing. The silence that followed was profound enough that Krixna could hear the ship's environmental systems cycling in the background. He watched Mitchell process this information, and for the first time since meeting her, he saw something like uncertainty in her expression. Admiral, with respect, I'm not sure I'm the appropriate choice for a diplomatic mission of that magnitude. Admiral Chen's smile was visible even through the communication link. Commander, you've just demonstrated that a single human security team can neutralize threats that would require entire battle fleets using conventional tactics. You've turned enemies into allies, captured advanced technology, and done it all while protecting a civilian merchant vessel. If that's not diplomacy, I don't know what is. She leaned forward slightly. The Council needs to understand that humans don't think about conflict the same way other species do. They need to understand our capabilities, our limitations, and, most importantly, our intentions. You're uniquely qualified to provide that explanation. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment before responding. What's the timeline? You're to proceed directly to the Council chambers on Nexus Station. Your captured fleets will be escorted by Admiral Harrison's task force. You'll be briefing the full Council in 72 hours. After the communication ended, the command center remained silent for several minutes. Krixna found himself studying the humans' reactions, trying to understand the implications of what he had just heard. Commander, he said finally, may I ask what you intend to tell the Galactic Council? Mitchell turned to look at him, and her expression carried something he hadn't seen before, something that might have been concern. The truth, she replied simply, though I'm not sure they're going to like it. She activated the ship's internal communication system. All crew, this is Commander Mitchell. We've received new orders from Fleet Command. We're proceeding directly to Nexus Station for what you might call a diplomatic mission. She paused, and, when she continued, her voice carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire ship. I want everyone to understand that what we've accomplished over the past few days is going to have consequences beyond our immediate mission. The way we've conducted ourselves, the methods we've used, the results we've achieved, all of it is going to be scrutinized by representatives of every major species in the galaxy. Another pause, and Krixna realized he was holding his breath. What they're going to learn is that humans approach conflict differently than other species. We don't fight to prove our strength or to demonstrate our superiority. We fight to solve problems. And sometimes, the best way to solve a problem is to make sure it never becomes a problem again. She deactivated the communication system and turned back to the command crew. Captain Thorne, please set course for Nexus Station. Maximum sustainable velocity. Rodriguez, I want a full after-action analysis of both fleet encounters ready for presentation. Kim, compile all technical data we've gathered into a format suitable for academic review. As the crew dispersed to carry out their assignments, Mitchell remained at her station, studying the tactical displays showing their captured vessels. Krixna, she said without turning around, you've observed our operations more closely than anyone else aboard this vessel. What do you think the Galactic Council needs to understand about humanity? The question caught him completely off guard. He had expected to continue observing human activities from a distance, not to be asked for his analysis of their strategic implications. I'm not certain I am qualified to make such assessments. You're qualified, Mitchell replied, finally, turning to face him. You've seen us in action. You've watched us transition from peaceful merchants to military operators and back again. You understand our capabilities in a way that most galactic citizens never will. She gestured toward the tactical display. What concerns you most about what you've seen? Krixna considered the question carefully. What did concern him most about human military capabilities? Was it their technological sophistication? Their strategic thinking? Their apparent ability to turn any situation to their advantage? Your unpredictability, he said finally. Other species follow patterns, use strategies that can be analyzed and countered. But humans seem to approach each situation as if they had never encountered anything like it before. Mitchell nodded slowly. That's because we haven't. Human military doctrine is based on the assumption that every conflict is unique, that previous experience can inform but not dictate our response to new situations. She moved to the observation port, looking out at the captured vessels traveling in formation with them. The thing the Galactic Council needs to understand, she continued, is that humans don't want to be the dominant military force in the galaxy. We don't want to conquer other species or impose our will on galactic civilization. Then we want. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried something that might have been sadness. We want to make sure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else. What happened to you? We spent our entire evolutionary history being hunted by things stronger, faster, and more dangerous than we were. We learned to survive by being clever, being adaptable, and by helping each other when everything else wanted to kill us. She turned back to face him, and Crixna saw something in her expression that he was beginning to recognize as fundamentally human. The galaxy is full of predators, Crixna, species that view other beings as resources to be exploited or consumed. The Crimson Fleet, the Devourer Fleet, they're just the ones we happen to encounter this week. She gestured toward the stars beyond the observation port. Humans have decided that we're not going to be prey anymore. And, more importantly, we're not going to let anyone else be prey either. That's what the Galactic Council is really afraid of. Not our weapons, or our tactics, or our technology. What then? Mitchell's smile returned, but this time it carried something that made Crixna's threat assessment systems activate involuntarily. They're afraid that we might actually mean it when we say we're here to help. As the Prosperity's Edge and its accompanying fleet accelerated toward Nexus Station, Crixna found himself contemplating the implications of that statement. He was beginning to understand that the briefing Commander Mitchell would deliver to the Galactic Council would be more than just a military presentation. It would be humanity's formal announcement that the galaxy had acquired new protectors, whether it wanted them or not. Exus Station represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. Built at the convergence of 7 major hyperspace routes, it served as the political and cultural center of the known galaxy. Its massive structure housed representatives from over 200 species, making it the most diverse location in explored space. Crixna had never imagined he would see Nexus Station, much less participate in a formal presentation to the Galactic Council. As their shuttle approached the station's diplomatic docking bays, he found himself studying the massive structure through the viewport with something approaching religious awe. "Impressive, isn't it?" Commander Mitchell said, settling into the seat beside him. Took 47 species working together for over a century to complete the original construction. It's probably the greatest collaborative achievement in galactic history. Have you been here before? Several times, usually for much less dramatic reasons. Mitchell's expression carried something that might have been amusement. The last time I was here, I was attending a symposium on interspecies communication protocols, much quieter than today's agenda. Through the shuttle's communication system came the voice of their pilot, Sergeant Rodriguez. "Commander, we're being escorted to Diplomatic Base 7. Looks like they're taking security seriously. I count at least 12 different species represented in the honor guard." "Standard procedure for high-level diplomatic meetings," Mitchell replied. "The Council takes protocol very seriously." As their shuttle settled into the docking bay, Crixna could see through the viewports that Rodriguez hadn't exaggerated about the security presence. Representatives from multiple species stood in formal formation, their various forms of ceremonial armor and diplomatic regalia creating a display that represented the full diversity of galactic civilization. "Nervous?" Mitchell asked as they prepared to disembark. Crixna considered the question. Was he nervous? He was about to participate in a diplomatic presentation that could fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. He had witnessed capabilities that challenged everything he thought he knew about military science. He was accompanying humans who had demonstrated the ability to turn impossible situations to their advantage using methods he barely understood. "Terrified," he replied honestly. Mitchell's laugh was genuinely warm. "Good. That means you understand the stakes. Fear can be useful if you don't let it paralyze you." They disembarked into what could only be described as controlled chaos. Representatives from dozens of species moved through the diplomatic bay with purposes Krixna couldn't begin to guess at. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension as various delegations prepared for what everyone understood would be a historic session. Commander Mitchell, a tall, graceful being, approached them with movements that suggested either advanced age or extensive diplomatic experience. "I am Ambassador Veltar, Chief of Protocol for the Galactic Council. We have been expecting you." Mitchell inclined her head in what Krixnar recognized as a formal acknowledgement of diplomatic rank. "Ambassador, thank you for accommodating our schedule. The Council is eager to hear your presentation," Veltar replied, though something in their tone suggested eager might not be the most accurate description. "We have prepared the Grand Assembly Chamber for your use. All Council members will be present." As they moved through Nexus Station's corridors, Krixna found himself overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the structure. Beings from across the galaxy moved through passages designed to accommodate radically different physiologies, while holographic displays provided real-time translation services in hundreds of languages. "The Grand Assembly Chamber," Veltar explained as they approached massive doors inscribed with symbols from across galactic civilization, "represents the democratic heart of our shared government. What you say here today will be recorded for posterity and transmitted to every member world of the Council." The doors opened to reveal a space that defied easy description. The chamber was designed as a vast amphitheater with seating arranged to accommodate every known form of sentient biology. Representatives from aquatic species occupied fluid-filled environmental pods, while energy-based beings manifested in specialized containment fields. The air itself was maintained at a carefully balanced composition that could support the majority of oxygen-breathing species. At the center of the chamber stood a presentation platform equipped with holographic projection systems and universal translation equipment. As they approached it, Krixnar realized that every representative in the chamber was focused on their small group with an intensity that made his chitinous plates shift nervously. "Council members," Ambassador Veltar announced, their voice carrying clearly throughout the vast space. "I present Commander Sarah Mitchell of the Human Defense Corps, here to provide clarification regarding recent human military activities in the disputed zones." Mitchell stepped onto the presentation platform with the same calm confidence Krixna had observed during their encounters with hostile fleets. As she activated the holographic projection system, the chamber fell into a silence so complete that the station's environmental systems seemed deafeningly loud by comparison. "Honored representatives," Mitchell began, her voice carrying easily throughout the chamber despite its enormous size, "I want to thank the Council for this opportunity to address concerns regarding human military capabilities and intentions." She gestured, and the holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of the disputed zones, with recent human activities highlighted in blue. Over the past week, human forces conducted 2 operations in this region. Both operations were successful by conventional military standards, but I understand that the methods we employed have raised questions about human strategic doctrine. The display shifted to show tactical analyses of both the Crimson Fleet and Devourer Fleet encounters. Krixna watched as representatives throughout the chamber studied the data with expressions ranging from fascination to deep concern. "Before I explain our tactical approach," Mitchell continued, "I think it's important for the Council to understand something fundamental about human military philosophy." She paused, and the chamber seemed to hold its collective breath. "Humans do not fight to win battles. We fight to prevent wars." The statement hung in the air like a challenge, and Krixna could see representatives throughout the chamber reacting to the implications. Every species in this chamber developed their military traditions based on their evolutionary history, Mitchell explained. Predator species learned to dominate through superior force. Prey species learned to survive through evasion and defensive tactics. Hive species developed coordination strategies based on collective decision-making. The holographic display shifted again, this time showing evolutionary trees for various galactic species alongside their corresponding military doctrines. Humans evolved as prey animals that learned to hunt predators. Our military strategies reflect that unique evolutionary path. She manipulated the display to show human historical data, and Krixna was surprised to see how much information she was willing to share with the Council. "For most of our species' existence, we were hunted by creatures larger, stronger, and more naturally equipped for violence than we were. We survived by learning to think differently about conflict, Instead of trying to overpower our enemies, we learned to outmaneuver them. Instead of fighting fair, we learned to fight smart. A representative from the Gorlan Empire, their massive frame dominating their section of the chamber, spoke up. Commander, your explanations are interesting, but they do not address the Council's primary concern. How were human forces able to neutralize two separate fleets without sustaining casualties? Mitchell smiled, and Krixnar recognized the expression that had preceded every demonstration of human tactical capabilities he had witnessed. That's an excellent question, Counselor. The answer involves understanding what humans call asymmetric warfare. The holographic display shifted to show a detailed analysis of both fleet encounters, breaking down each phase of the operations. In both cases, our opponents made the same fundamental error. They assessed the tactical situation based on visible assets and conventional threat profiles. They saw a single merchant vessel with a small security detail and concluded that they held overwhelming advantages. She highlighted specific moments in the tactical timeline. What they failed to account for was that human security operations don't rely solely on direct confrontation. We use intelligence gathering, technological infiltration, psychological manipulation, and strategic misdirection to achieve our objectives. The display showed the infiltration operations that had preceded both encounters, and Krixnar watched as representatives throughout the chamber reacted to the revelation of just how thoroughly the human teams had prepared for each engagement. The pirates and the Devourers weren't defeated by superior firepower, Mitchell explained. They were defeated by superior information and better strategic planning. Another representative, this one from the aquatic depth dwellers, rippled their communication tendrils in what Krixnar recognized as a formal question gesture. Commander, the Council acknowledges the effectiveness of your tactics. Our concern is regarding the implications for galactic security. If humans can neutralize military fleets with such ease, what prevents your species from using these capabilities for conquest rather than protection? The question seemed to be what the entire chamber had been waiting for, and the silence that followed was profound. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that seemed to reach every corner of the vast space. Because we remember what it feels like to be hunted. She gestured, and the display shifted to show images from human history. Images of early humans hiding from predators, building shelters, working together to survive in a hostile world. Every human alive carries the genetic memory of being prey. We know what it's like to be weak, to be afraid, to face threats we couldn't overcome through strength alone. That experience shapes everything we do. The images shifted to show human development over time, the gradual transition from prey to protector. When humans encountered the galaxy's predator species, we didn't see enemies to be conquered. We saw the same threats our ancestors faced. Bigger, stronger beings who viewed other species as resources to be exploited. She turned to address the chamber directly. The question isn't whether humans could use our capabilities for conquest. The question is why we would want to. We didn't develop these abilities to become apex predators ourselves. We developed them to make sure no one else has to experience what we experienced. The Gorlan representative spoke again. You claim to be protectors, but your methods inspire fear even among those you claim to protect. Mitchell nodded slowly. Fear is a natural response to the unknown. But I want the Council to understand something important about human psychology. The display shifted again, this time showing psychological profiles of human military personnel. Every human soldier, every human commander, every human who participates in military operations carries within them the same fear you're experiencing right now. The difference is that we've learned to use that fear constructively. She gestured toward the tactical displays, still showing the fleet encounters. When we infiltrated those pirate and devourer vessels, my people weren't feeling confident or superior. They were terrified, but they were more afraid of what would happen to innocent beings if they failed than they were of what might happen to themselves if they were discovered. The chamber was completely silent now. Every representative focused entirely on Mitchell's words. That's the secret of human military effectiveness. We don't fight because we're not afraid. We fight because we're afraid of the right things. She deactivated the holographic display and stood quietly for a moment before continuing. The Galactic Council asked for this briefing because you wanted to understand human military capabilities. But capabilities aren't what make humans dangerous. What makes us dangerous is that we remember being powerless, and we've decided that no one should have to feel that way again. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species. The pirates who threatened merchant vessels in the disputed zones? They're not threats anymore. The devourers who hunted civilian populations? They're being rehabilitated rather than destroyed. That's not because we're merciful. It's because we understand that turning enemies into allies is more effective than simply eliminating them. A representative from the Crystalline Harmony Collective chimed in harmonic frequencies that Krixna's translation implant rendered as speech. Commander, your explanation suggests that human military doctrine is based on psychological principles rather than tactical superiority. How can the Council verify your species' stated intentions? Mitchell smiled, and for the first time since the presentation began, the expression seemed entirely human in its warmth. By watching what we do instead of listening to what we say. Judge humanity by our actions, not our words. She reactivated the display, this time showing detailed reports of human activities throughout the galaxy over the past decade. Human forces have responded to 47 different crisis situations in the past 10 years. In every case, we intervened to protect civilian populations or assist with humanitarian disasters. In every case, we withdrew our forces once the crisis was resolved. The data was comprehensive, showing human involvement in everything from natural disaster relief to anti-piracy operations. We've never occupied territory that didn't belong to us. We've never demanded tribute or concessions for our assistance. We've never used our military capabilities to gain political or economic advantages. She paused, letting the implications of the data sink in. The Council is right to be concerned about human military capabilities. We are dangerous in ways that conventional galactic military doctrine doesn't account for. But the danger we represent isn't to galactic civilization itself. The display shifted one final time, showing a galaxy-wide threat assessment matrix.